Okay, so last week is more or less like a review, mostly a review of JavaScript, and we covered some Vue code briefly, just to show you what the Vue code would look like, how that compares to if you don't use any framework, just using plain JavaScript. And from this week on, we're going to actually focusing on using Vue now, so cover everything using Vue. And so we start with the kind of most fundamental thing, which is a Vue instance. And so the concept of this instance is almost like the idea of class in other languages. So, and JavaScript now also has its own class. You can have a class, and every time you are kind of running an instance of the Vue class. Vue itself is one class, and you create an instance of that, and then you can start using all the other features defined or functions defined in Vue. So that's the idea of the Vue instance. Okay, and so this is what we will cover today. We actually maybe go through the requirement for coursework 1 quickly first, and then we talk about Vue instance. How do you create it? We already created one last week because you have to create one to have a Vue running. And so this time will be a bit more details. And then we will show you how do you use or add the Chrome extension. And so because the Vue code, for example, you use say these Vue directives, they call Vue directives like a v-on or the @ symbol, and the browser doesn't understand those. So these codes need to be translated into plain JavaScript, and before the browser can run it. So this is the same for any other libraries which use its own kind of specialized languages or directives. And then as a result, you cannot see the original Vue code in the browser because this code has already been translated. It's can be very different from what you wrote, and which made debugging a little bit more difficult. And so there's this Chrome extensions which allows you to still see the code as they are running in the browser from a Vue point of view. So how it would work as Vue code. And finally, we'll talk about or show a small example of displaying one product within Vue.js. So we're going to move away from the to-do list that we showed last week. And this is kind of walking towards what we will build in the module, which is the online shop, which allow people to book class lessons. And in this case, we're going to using an online shop where sell pet products. So we start by displaying just one product. Okay, so we already mentioned, and this module is coursework only. We don't have exams. We have 3 coursework. The first one, 35% is on Vue, and the second one, 35% is on the back. This is still the old one. I haven't updated. And the second one will be on the back end, and the third one will be on the progressive web app. And we are not covering the native script this year. Okay, and overall, you need 40% mark to pass the module. That's the same as before. Let me just double check if I'm using the latest version. So I thought I updated these. Okay, so it looks like I'm using the correct version. Okay, and yeah, and so you don't need to pass each coursework, pass the module, and so long as overall you have 40%, it's fine, you can pass the module. Okay, and each coursework have a marked in-lab task. This is a group, and we need to demonstrate to the lab. And I'm asking you, all the group members would receive the same mark, or I'm asking you to be present at the demonstration. And also the rest of the mark, for example, the first coursework is 35%, so 10% is group work, and the next 25% or the rest 25% will be individual ones. So the individual ones is always the main component and needs to demonstrate in lab, but it's only to me, not to the rest of the class or the lab. And you have to demonstrate, otherwise you will not get any mark. And so one of the reasons for the demonstration is to make sure you actually understand the code. And then if you use the code from the lectures or from online examples, that's completely fine. And just to make sure you understand, because you need to explain in the demonstration. And if you can't explain, you will not get mark for the code. Okay, and so the first coursework, and we are creating the front end of this web app, which allows students and parents to book after school classes and activities. The second coursework will add backend. So the first coursework, you can't really save anything. And so once you refresh the page, all the data will be gone. And in the second coursework, you will save that and actually make it working. Hang on, I'm pretty sure I updated these. Why those are still the old ones? Sorry, give me a second. I think I have updated these, but I'm still seeing the old ones. Okay, yeah, I think this is the right one now. Yeah. And in terms of task, I'm not sure which one I was using. And so for the first coursework, and you create this front end, and the second one would add backend, make it work offline. And so that's, you are using the database. So the second coursework is most about backend. And the third one about turn into the whole thing into a mobile app, but also add a little bit more advanced features to that. Okay, and for the first one, we don't need any backend, don't need MongoDB or local storage. You don't need to save anything. As I said, you don't need to, I think again, this needs to be updated. And you can use external libraries and like a CSS library, like a Bootstrap. And just make sure if you use Bootstrap, it works. If you load it locally, you need to put the Bootstrap files and in the submission. But if I recommend you just load an online version of the Bootstrap somewhere in one of the CDNs, just as the way we load and view. And in that case, you don't need to include Bootstrap. And so this is the same for all the libraries you use. If it's locally, you need to be including submission, and its recommended way will be just to load the library online from some server. Okay, obviously you need to use Java and you need to view for the coursework, and you're not allowed to use anything else that's replace the functions in view. Those kind of libraries not allowed to use. Okay, next. Okay, so yeah, this is like some of the hard requirements. If you fail these, I don't even need to mark your work. You will fail straight away, get 0 mark. And so must be implemented in Vue. I guess that's straightforward. And don't use any other framework. And don't use single file component or SFC. And if you don't understand what that is, that's completely fine. And this is something we'll cover later. So you're not allowed to use that for the first coursework. In the third coursework, we'll start using single file component. Okay, and you have to be demonstrated, which I already explained. And if you don't explain, you can't explain the code, you will lose mark. Okay, and so this is what the more specific marking criteria is. And for the group in-lab group work, and it's 10%, and you just need to create a view app, which can do something like this, which is very simple, just displaying the information of one lesson. Okay, you need to including these information there, subject, location, price. And then the information needs to be stored in a view object. And so what this means is you're not allowed to hard code this as say HTML. You have to be say store this in the view data, which I'll explain later what that is, and then use that to display on the page or in the app. Okay, and you need this add to cart button, this button here. And every time you click that button, the number of space available will be reduced by 1. And if it's no more, if the space is already 0, and you can't, and further add to the cart. So if it's already 0 and you click this add to button, nothing should happen. Even better if you can just disable the button if it's 0. And then the interaction must be implemented using v-on. So that's like the the view equivalent of onClick, and something to make it a little bit easier. Okay, and also you need to use GitHub and repository. So you need to store on the GitHub with at least 5, and you want to make the view pages accessible through GitHub pages. And these ones, and we'll cover in the lecture how to use GitHub and GitHub pages. And so GitHub is, we explained Git, and then GitHub is like the online storage, which allows you to save your Git and repositories, which is basically a history of your code changes. And GitHub Pages is like an online hosting service. Like, you know, if you want to put your website online in the server, and people can type in the URL in the server in their browser and see your page or website. And so the GitHub Pages allows you to do very similar things. But in this case, we are not say loading a static website. This will be loading the web apps you created within Vue. And there will be, so the individual task, and 25%, that's the deadline. Again, you have to store the data in the GitHub repository. And this time you need a bit more commits because it's more complex. And the same thing, you need to make it available through GitHub pages. Okay, and in terms of marking scheme, you can see what you need to do for the individual work is more complex compared to the group one, even if they are similar. So we need the 10 lessons, and each lesson has 5 space, and these lessons should have these information, which is the same, and you need a picture as well. Okay, and in this case, we'll ask you to store the list of array of JSON objects in a separate file, like a json.js as a JSON array. We'll show you a little bit later on, because in this case, you have more lesson now, and we don't want to just put all the lesson information in the main view part of the code, because it's going to make the whole file much longer and harder to read. Instead, we're going to put all the lesson information in a separate file. Could be called lesson.js, could be other names. And they're stored as an array of JSON objects. And this is the easiest way for Vue to actually access this information. Okay, and in this case, we're going to use v4 to display the lesson list. So v4 is similar to the for loop in JavaScript. It goes through, because we have 10 lessons. So we want to use v4 to loop through the 10 lessons, and for each lesson, you display all the information, add that to the app. So I don't want you to say, write display lessons 10 times. Okay, And this will be new. So when you need to do a little bit of sorting, and in terms of, it can either sort by, the user should be able to sort by one of these attributes, any of them. So user can decide which they want to sort by: subject, location, price, or availability. And they should be able to choose and whether the sorting should be ascending or descending. So in this case, user choose price and choose ascending, and user can choose subject and change the sorting order as well. That will be part of the interface. And then this is add to cart. You need the add to cart button, and the button is enabled only when there's still space available. Once the space is 0, and it should be disabled. And click it once or add 1 space to the shopping cart and reduce the remaining space by 1. So that's similar as the previous ones. Okay, here and more specific, say once it has no more space left, and you should disable the button. So the user can't click it, but it still should be visible there. So user can still see there is a button. And then the shopping cart itself. And so you should have a button which allows you to go to the shopping cart. And that button should be enabled. And only after a lesson, at least one lesson is added to the shopping cart. And if the shopping cart is empty, it should be disabled. And if you click the shopping cart button, which is not shown here, you should go to the cart on which list. Okay, and you click the button again, go back to the lesson page. And the shopping cart should show all the lessons added. And so this is maybe I add 2 lessons, 1 English, 1 math and 1 English. So that should display everything that's being added. And the user should be able to remove lessons from the shopping cart. So you have this remove button, and the user can click and remove that from the list. So the remove the lessons should be add back to the lesson list. Okay, so for example, if I remove the math lesson from my shopping cart, and then the number of space in the shopping list should go back to 5, because there's nothing being taken or from the inventory. Okay, and the last part, and you need a checkout. I mean, obviously, we're not doing any real checkout yet. So, and we only ask for a name and phone number. User needs to enter those before they can check out. So the name must be letters only, and phone must be numbers only. So we're not limiting, say, how long these be, but you shouldn't say allow any letters in phone number, or shouldn't allow any, say, symbols in name. Okay, and you ask you to write some JavaScript code to check these, and you are not allowed to just use, say, a text, say HTML, say type equal to number. So this will require regular expressions, so you might need to look. The easiest way is probably using regular expressions. That's not the only way. And if you want to use that, you need to do a little bit of research yourself. We don't have time to cover that in the module. And this is just part of the JavaScript. It's not Vue or any part of the Vue.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. Can I ask one question?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, I just wanted to know that have we do we need to do do we need to make any user account, something like that? Like a user login.
User account.
Yeah, user account, like user database in the local storage.
No, we're not making any user account. Actually, we're not making any user account for the all 3 courseworks. We're not doing any user accounts or login.
Okay, yeah, because you're saying like button is only enabled after like valid name and phone number. So that's why I got a little bit confused with this statement, last statement.
Yeah, so here it says valid. It just means a phone number must be only numbers.
Oh, number format.
Cannot
Okay, got
have
your point.
letters.
Yeah, got your point.
And the same, the name should only be letters, can't have, say, numbers. That's all it is. We're not checking against the database if it's saved or not.
Yeah, got your point. Thank you, sir.
Okay, then you need a checkout button, which should only be enabled after valid name and phone number are provided. So ideally, it should be checked on the fly as the user types in, and so for example, when it starts, both the name and phone number will be empty. So the checkout button should be disabled. As user types in, even user typing both fields, if for example, the phone number is not all numbers, then this should be still disabled. But I mean,
sorry, sir.
Yeah.
Would you mind explaining the remove button again, please? Didn't quite catch that.
Okay, and let me just finish this one.
Yeah, sure, definitely. No
go
worries.
back to the remove button. And finally, the last point is if you click the checkout button, so if you enter the valid name and the phone number, and you click the checkout button, the only thing you need to do is just pop out the message confirming order being submitted. Nothing else. You don't need to actually save the data or do anything else. So it just say alert and message. That's all you need. Okay, going back to the remove, and remove is opposite of the add. So if you click remove button, then that lesson should be removed from shopping cart. So if I click this one, which actually nothing's going to change, but then the math lesson should be removed from my shopping cart. I should only have English left.
Okay, yeah. You didn't catch that it was in shopping cart. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, it should be like this. If we added like 10 maths, so if we just click on remove math, it will like remove all 10 math, or it will just remove 10 math.
Okay. So from what I've seen before, so if you have more than one math lessons, people implement two ways. Some people would implement, say, you have in the shopping cart, you have math, and it will show how many times you added math. So you may say math, and you added it 3 times. And if you click remove, and it will remove 1 at a time. So it will reduce from 3 to 2 and 2 to 1, and finally remove the whole thing. That's fine. And the other people will be, if you have 3 maths, they just have 3 math boxes in the shopping cart. That's also okay. And every time you click remove, it remove 1 of the boxes. So either way is fine. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, yes, I got your point. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, we done checkout. Okay. So I did update, but okay. And this is the last part. So this is called as a challenge component. So I'm not expecting anyone to complete it because it's quite difficult. And it's only meant for people who want a little bit extra challenge. Okay, and so this is a search, and which again is very common features in most of these apps or online websites. And so we will not cover how to do that in the lab. So you are free to research how to do it. Okay, and so what we hoping for, or what we ask for, is full text search. And so it's a bit different from the database queries. You don't have to say, I'm searching for a lesson whose subject that contains the word or the letter M. And user does not have to do, user just type M. So everything that contains M will be retained. So the M can be in the subject, can be in the location, or can be in the description if there's one. Okay, and so here, I gave you examples, say, hang on. So here I gave you examples, and if I type in A in the search, then anything contains A should show up. Could be A in the titles of the lessons or even in the location of the places. And also, A does not have to be the first letter. Anywhere in the text, so long as it contains A, it should return. Okay, And again, so you can use some JavaScript library, and there are search libraries which you can use to implement these features, and that makes it relatively easier. And so in this case, you get 2%. And then if you write your own search functions, that's will be a bit harder, and you can get 4 marks. And then this one is even more difficult. So something like a search as you type. So this is something like a Google. If you go to Google search, and as soon as you start typing, even not fully finished, and then the results will be already displayed. Okay, and so if you can even do that as well, and you get extra 1%. And so if you use library, it's 2. Use your own function, it's 4%. And in either cases, if you can do search as you type, and you get this extra 1%. Okay. So this is actually quite difficult, and so that's quite a bit of work for 5%. So only expected for people having quite a bit challenge. Where did the slides come? Yeah. Okay, and so that's in terms of the first coursework. And is there any more questions about the first coursework?
So,
Yeah.
which parts are for group and which part is individual?
Okay. I might go through that too quickly. Let me go back. So the group work is actually relatively simple, and it's much more to do for all individual work. So all those are individual ones. So for the group work, really just create one thing like this. That's all, with the add to cart button. That's kind of the brief description of what the group coursework is.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other question? Okay. Someone says, is there an assignment brief? And the details is in the module handbook. What I've presented here is exactly the same, or will be in the module handbook. So you can have a look there. Okay. I'm going to, okay. And I'll update the slides. I think some of them are not updated.
I have one question. So you see how the group lab task is deadline week 6, I believe, and then
Yeah.
and then the individual coursework is at the end of week 8. So we have 2 weeks to finish that, or we've got more time.
No, that is a deadline, and you don't have to finish or start. Let's say you don't have to and start working on your individual work after you finish the group work. And the group work is actually relatively easy. I would recommend you start much earlier. So I think for the group work, we have like a 2 or even 3 weeks for that. And for if you are, I think most people should be able to actually finish the group work within the first week.
Okay.
I would really recommend people start working on the individual ones right after that, and rather than say wait until you and finish the or presented or demonstrated the group work.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to the next part now, which is actually about the view instance. So this part we probably would do a bit more coding. And so first, just like quick review of the code we created last week, which is the to-do app. So this is not the entire code because it'll be difficult to fit everything on the screen. And so you have the HTML part, which is here, and then the view part, which is here. And in many cases, you probably want to put the view part in a separate JavaScript file and load it. And just for the demonstration purpose, it's easier when it's only the same file, so I don't have to switch. And okay, and then in this part, there's nothing special. It's all standard HTML and nothing new. And the only thing here is saying we have this ID equal to app, and that will be used in the view code later on. And then we can see explained. So this is new view with a curly bracket. So that's exactly where you create a new instance of the view class. That's how you do it. So you say new view is the name of the class, and then there's a bracket. Inside bracket, you can put parameters, which is very common when you create a new class instance or object. Probably shouldn't say object, but new class instance, and you can add in some parameters. And everything you added is the parameter. Okay, and so there's EL, which stands for element. That tells the view code where to mount. They call the mount. Basically, add your view code to the part of the page, and you can have multiple view instances for the same page, and each do slightly different things. And essentially, it says I'm gonna start my or add my view code to the page where this ID is equal to app. So there's element, should have element, has ID equal to app, which is this one here. So that's going to be where I mount my view instance. And that also means within this element, so from here to here, and so any code in between those two, you can use all these view different directives. For example, you can refer to the data you defined here. That would only work within this part where you mount the view code. And then the data part is the data you want to use, almost like the variables you can use in view, but it has to be inside with the values of the data property, and it has a different variable and their values. And you can define different functions, and these can be called the methods, and they can have different names for these methods. So the EL data and methods are predefined keywords. You have to use those, and so then view knows what those things are. So this will be the mounting point, and these will be the data you can use, usually variables, and under the methods will be the different functions that you can use. Okay, so yeah, this is kind of already explained. So the way to create a new view instance is by using this. And so that's the syntax for JavaScript class, and that will be the class name. That's the convention. Usually a class name is started with capital. And if you define an instance of it or an object of it, and you would use a small case letter to start with. But this is how you create instance. I mean, I think it's very similar to Java as well. And then when you're creating inside this curly, inside this bracket, pair of bracket, you can add options. So most of your view code is actually the options. So the options, including the EL, the data, the methods. So these are all just options. But in general, the way they formatted is formatted as a JSON object. So that's why I have the curly bracket here. Yeah, and so as we already mentioned, you have this EL property inside the option object. Okay, this is called option objects. Object. The EL property is for to specify a DOM element where the view will be mounted. Okay, so EL is the first two letters of the elements. That's why I call it EL. And you can specify as a ID, which as we did, you can specify as a class name, or you can even specify as an element like a P or div or something. And when you specify as a ID, and it's easier because it's specific, you can only have one element with that particular ID on a page. But if you specify as a class or as element, and it will by default just pick the first one, and then that will change. For example, you said, let's say I want to mount it to the first div element, then later on you add another div before that div, then it will change, will refer to a different div on your page, and then your code might not working anymore. So it's always recommended to just refer to an ID you defined earlier. Okay, as again, we kind of mentioned, and what you put in here is a JSON object. And so you have to follow this key value pair format. And also it's always key, comma, values, and then, so yeah, and then comma. So this is column and then comma. So this is how you define. You can have multiple ones. Okay, and this ones has some predefined ones. We already seen. Have the EL for the element you want to mount. Data is for the data. What variables you will define. Methods are your view functions.
So
Yeah.
for the key and value, can you give more than one value? And how would you do that?
Okay, so the value itself does not have to be a simple, does not have to be a text string or numbers. The value itself can be a JSON object or even a function. So for example, or even the array. Any data types can be the value here. Yeah, depends on what you are. So if I have multiple values of the same type, you might define as an array. And for example, for the case of method, the key will be method and the value actually is a function. So it can be as complex as you want.
So for the coursework, let's say key is the subject, and then value, can you make a list there? So the price, the spaces left, and then.
And we'll see some more examples later. So usually these keys are the predefined ones, because if you define your own keys, for example, I call a key element, you could do that, but the view would not know what to do with that. More likely is you will use one of these predefined ones. So you have element called data, and data itself, its value is another JSON object, and inside it has different variables and their values, which is what we did. We'll see more examples later. Is that okay for now?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, we'll see some more examples will be clearer. Okay, again, so if we go back here. So this is where we're going to start creating a very simple Unview app. This is actually the same examples we're going to follow from the book, the Vue.js in action. So that's the textbook. And for this part of the module, and what we covered here is very similar to what you need to do for the coursework. And there's kind of some superficial difference in case here is a pet store and you add pet product. And in the coursework, it's a after class club list or shop. And then you add, say, different lessons. That's superficial. In terms of actual code, it's very similar. And you need to display these things, you need to search or sort them and be able to add them to cart. That's all the same. Okay, in terms for this examples, you're building an online pet accessory shop called Pet Depot. And the name is not critical, but we just follow the examples in the book. So it's the same name. Okay, and so it'll be very similar, as I said. And for the apps you're going to build for your coursework, as I mentioned, and all the example code in the book is available online. So this is an example from the code. This is example from the book. So its code is also available online, and that's the website. Okay, so I think this is, we are skipping to chart 2. Yeah, and you can see the code there. See why I'm getting here. Okay. Huh? I don't think that's the right one. Ah, yes, yes, I need to go back here. Okay. 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 So this is probably maybe the part we're gonna code as well, and I'll explain the different parts as we go along. So I'm gonna make this one a bit smaller now. And I will start my editor. Code. Okay. So the code editor should be starting up now. Okay, I hope you can still see the screen. Okay, and so what we're seeing here is we're creating a pet depot. We're going to use very similar ways as we did before. And important thing here is we need to load the view files or view library and in the head section, so we can use these view functions later. And in the body now, there's nothing much more. And just says we defined or created the ID with, sorry, div with an ID called app. Then I can link to that later in my code. And so I'm gonna just do that now. I'm gonna create a new file. I just called depot. So pet. Okay. So one thing we need, as I said, we need to load the view files. So yeah, need to type in. And this is probably not the only place where you can get view on PKG. There's many other URLs, but this one should work. Okay, and the inside body for now, we don't really have much. We only need a div element with defined ID, so we can refer to in the view as a mounting point. That's all I need. Okay, and then we need an actual script part. Okay. So okay, I'm going to stop that for now. So first we explain this new view and is a way to create an instance of view. So you always have to do that. And this part, you don't always have, but it is a good practice. And so you have, so that give you a way to reference to this particular view instance in the other part of code. And otherwise, so this is almost like an instance without a name. And this one gives a name, so you can reference to this instance later. And it's not required. And it's just something I found useful because often you need to refer to, say, the variable defined in the view data. And sometimes the keyword this does not always work because that changes with the context. Okay, as we said, almost all the code you wrote for this is the option, it's called option object, is say the parameters or the object you pass to the object view instance when you first create it. So itself is a JSON object, and so it's always inside the pair and curly bracket. Okay. And then inside this JSON object, we would have and different, how do I say, predefined keywords, and you can give it a value. So EL is one of them. In this case, we want to mount. So as we said, EL specifies the mounting point, and this one we want to mount here. And you could say hashtag app. So hashtag means ID. For example, I can say dot app. That means I want to mount to an element whose class is app, or I can just say div. That means I want to mount to an element that is a div. So saying div or dot app has a problem potentially because you have multiple class with multiple elements with app class, then it will mount to the first one, and which could change. So it's always recommended and set that to a ID. And then you have usually should have a semicolon at the end. So that's how you separate key value pairs in JSON objects. That's the same thing to follow. And in this case, we don't really need it because we only have one key value pair attribute here. Okay, I can make this a bit smaller. I can make my slides bigger. Ooh.
Untitled. Well, why do we need to use text JavaScript?
No, I don't need to. This part is not compulsory. And so this is just saying, okay, I'm having a script tag, and inside I'm writing JavaScript. In theory, you can put in other script as well, but the default value is always JavaScript. And it's, I mean, you almost don't use any other type of script now inside the HTML file or script tag. So often you don't need that. Just script will be fine. Okay, let me see. Looks like we covered this already. And in terms of point selector, yeah. So as I said, and it does not have to be ID. Any CSS selector can be used, and you can say it's element or class, etc. It will work. It just says ID is always most specific. An element probably least specific because there can be many divs on the page, and we'll pick the first one, which potentially can change. Yeah, as we said, if there's more than one, it will pick the first one. So if you said div, then we'll pick the first div. Same for class. Okay, and so this part is going to be a bit more interesting. Okay, so potentially you can have multiple view mounting points and multiple view instances in the same page. And so if you look at it here, we have this div ID equals this one. Okay, I can potentially have another ID and another div with ID, let's call app2. And later on, and even in the same distance, I can say I don't know, let's just call this and checkout equal to new view. Ooh.
Sorry, I think I have a question.
Yeah.
Let me just finish this very quickly. Yeah. So what I did here is I defined a second view instance, and this instance is mounted to an element called app2. So this one would mount to this div. Okay, and you can write different things in here which will not affect anything wrote here. So these two are completely separate. They're not affecting each other. And you can add as many instances of a view on the same page as you want.
Can you add them? Can you add them to there? Can you put them to there? Or
Sorry?
can you put the two apps to there?
Can I add two apps where?
To there, like ID apps and ID app 2. Can you put them to there or not? Combine them.
Combine them?
Yeah. To make one app.
Okay, if you mean combine them, say, so for example, for this second one, I might have some data and I might have some own functions, and combine them means, okay, I move all the data from here to the data here and the methods here. And if that is want, definitely you can. And in that case, you don't need to define a second view instance on the page. So
yeah,
yeah,
that's what I want to ask you. Why do we create multiple instances of view? Can't we use one?
oh yeah. But say the reasons is you can, and they can do complete different things. So let's say, I don't know. So let's say the app is the part which actually do all the listing of the lessons and the shopping cart and anything. I don't know. And you can have a different app. I don't know. Maybe like this is the feedback. So actually, it's run a separate app which allows ask user for feedback about website, which is different things. And conceptually different from you would do inside an app. And this is like, does that make sense? Or
yeah, I think it
I mean,
does.
if it doesn't, that's completely fine. Just stick with one mounting point and one app on the page. That's completely fine. Okay, I mean, maybe a not very appropriate example, but just to say, when I'm teaching view and I want to show different view examples on the same page, and then I can use the first view app instance or to demonstrate how to use one type of methods, and then later on have a second one. I'm still using view, but in this case, I'm demonstrating a different view functions just on the page. That could be a user case or multiple view instances.
Okay, one more question. So does view support objects like classes and objects like OOP? Like how to create classes and instantiate them and all those things?
No, so view itself is like a predefined class.
Okay.
And
okay.
all you need to do is just create an instance of it before you can use in view. And after that, you don't need to define your own classes or instance of all classes unless you want to. It's not a requirement from view to do those.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And good. And any other question or?
That's fine. You can continue.
Yeah. Okay. And so the next slide is showing examples. And in this case, I have made 3 view instances, and they have its own mounting point on the page. You can have as many as you want. Okay. So the next one, I'm going to talk a little bit about using the Chrome extensions. As I explained before, the view code, for example, if you write these things, there's nothing too specific here yet. I mean, most of these things, and later on, for example, when I start using v-on or v4 or something, vf, those things, that's browser cannot run them directly. So those have to be translated into plain JavaScript first, and then run in the browser. And as a result, if you in the browser, you open your development console and check the source code, you will not see the view code. You will see they call it compile or transpile the code, and which made debugging difficult because something wrong in the compiled code, you don't know where the error comes from in your original code. So that's why the extension comes in. So you can still see not the original code, but almost like see the original code and how it works. And this is actually something if you run and the Chrome would ask you, sorry, the view would ask you to install anyway. So if you remember, let me open the live view. Live preview showing external, I think. Is this external? Yeah. Okay, obviously, and when I'm showing this one now, it does not give me anything because I only created the 2 instances, mount them to the page, and I didn't add anything to the app itself yet. All I want to show you now is in the console, and it actually would prompt you to install the extension anyway. Server, I can't find favicon, that's okay. Ah, I suppressed everything. Ah, it is not. Okay, that's interesting. Usually here, it's currently it says, yeah, and you are running in develop mode, so you have extra output in the console, and waiting for deployment or production, then you want less. But also, it usually would ask you to install the dev tools as well. Ignore this one, this is probably something else. Let's go back to the here. Yeah, so that's what we did so far. And if we open the one here and there's nothing there yet, if you look at the body, we only have these 2 div. We have some script here, but in the body, we just have 2 empty div elements, so it's empty. Okay, so this is what used to display. And so we're seeing this part. Ah, of course. And it shows that you are running developer mode. And if you want to go to so you should go to the deploying mode for the production. Okay, I know. So you should also see this one as well. And that's probably because I already installed and enabled the extension. So that's why it's not showing that message. Let me disable it. Yeah, indeed. Okay, and then I do it again. And I go to the console. Yeah, you can see it's actually prompting you now. And to download this tool extension, to give you the URL. I don't even think that's the best URL. I mean, but that is something useful to install, which I'll show you next. Okay. Oh, yeah. And so this is the other thing, and that's potentially useful is say, if you remember in the code, we actually give a name and to the view instance. And then later on, because I'll do that in the console, we can actually refer to that in the console. Otherwise, this will be a nameless or anonymous instance, which you will not be able to check. But now if you type web store here, it will recognize because that's a variable, essentially an object. And it will say, okay, this is a view instance, and you have all these properties defined by view, but also including the ones you define. For example, this one, and div is ID is app. This one is you defined. Okay, and this is one way to check the view in the browser, dev tools. Okay, and then so the thing it recommends you, or the extension it recommends you to install is called View Dev Tools, and the link they give you actually is the GitHub link. I don't think you can install directly from there. And so the best thing is probably just to search View Dev Tools, Chrome extension, something similar. So which should lead you to the Chrome Dev Store. which looks like this. And because I mean I'm already installed, so the option here is called remove from the Chrome. But if you haven't, they should say install. And also because I'm installed and it's already disabled currently, so I can show you the message in the console. It tells you can enable these items as well, because currently it detects it's disabled. Okay, and so this will be quite useful. And again, this is not compulsory. It just say one extra tools will make your life a little bit easier. Okay, and then once you install that, you click install and that's it. And you just need to enable it, which I will do now. Where did it go? Too many extensions. Okay, and then it should show up something like this. And you should have this icon. And sorry, I couldn't expand that in any way. And so you should see this kind of V-shaped icon in your Chrome toolbar. And currently it's grayed out because it knows this page does not use view. And when it goes to the page which actually use view, for example, this one, you can see it's actually changed color now to the full color ones, it's green. So that means it's actually detecting that page is using view. Okay, and to see that, you would see in the developer tools now at the very end, it might change. You have a new tab called view. So that's where you see all the things defined in that or created by that extension. If you click that, okay, and it actually shows you what it can detect. So it says it can detect two root. Essentially, we mounted two view instance. That's why you have two root. And you can click on that to inspect what's inside. And currently, we don't have anything there yet because for these two particular view instance, we only define the mounting point, nothing else yet. So that's why when you click here, you don't see anything. But later on, once you actually adding more code to your view instance, you will see something here as well. Okay. Yeah, the similar. So the key point is to make sure you go to the very end, looking for these options on a menu bar or tab. The last one called the view. That's where you see that. Okay. And sometimes it doesn't work because you are running the file locally and you might need to allow access to the file URL enabled. So I think it's in the Chrome, we should have this option now. And it will show all the extensions you installed. And then you go to view tools, more option. You have to say, I think it's manage extension or some other way, which allows you to go to the setting pages. And it says have this option, say allow access to file URL. And in my case, it's already work. And because I'm rendering this page and using a local server, I'm not sure if you can see, that's 127.0.0.1 and it's port 3000. So that's a local server created by the live preview extension in the Visual Studio Code. And so in that case, this is not treated as a local file. But if you just double click the files, maybe I'll do that just to show you. Say this is my file, that's in my local file. If I double click this, okay, and you can see the URL, it says file columns 3 slashes 3 forward slash with the file path and the file name. And then if I turn on the you still have these, but you can see I don't have that view tab at the end. And this view is also not changing color, still grayed out. That's because I'm locking this file, open this file from my computer as a file directory. So if you then allow access to file, and then I refresh this page again, And you can see now that becomes green. Ah, I still don't have my view, which it should. Yeah, now I have the view. I just have to close and reopen. Now it can detect it. Yeah. But I would say in most cases, you will be developing your code with some kind of local server. And so that should not be a problem. And also it's important just to check if this little icons turns to the extension icon turn to green or not. And that means whether it detects there's a view on the page or not. Okay, now we're gonna do the last part, which is actually adding a bit more code to our view instance, actually displaying one product. Let me just quickly check. Yeah, time-wise, we have about 20 minutes. We have to maybe move slightly faster. Okay, let me move this away. Okay, so and this will be the code. I can't see how many codes I have. Not many. In terms of code, now we add a little bit HTML. So we add the header, and we have the H1. And then in the H1, we could just add in the text we want. But in this case, we're gonna using some values from the view code or variable defined in the data of the view. Okay, and then v text will be one of the first view directives. That means they're going to replace the text for this element to the values of this view variable. That's all it does. And okay, you can see now we have the data, and we actually have the site name, which is exactly the name here. And this will be the actual text displayed on the page. And the advantage of doing this is you can actually change the variable or the values of this variable in view, and then the title will change as you change. Okay, so it should look like this. Let's do that now. So first inside, okay, let me just clear out this, the second one, which we don't really gonna use. And same layer don't need here. And then in our data, I'm gonna create something called site name. And then its value would be pet depot. Okay. And then here inside app, I said, this is our mounting point, and inside this element, we can use everything we define in view. So in this case, we're gonna have a H1, and we're gonna using v text. Probably the not the most ones, not the most ones, not the ones you're going to use most in the later v text, but good for demonstration purposes. Okay, so this is actually the part we're starting to use the function now. So we're starting to refer to the site name in the view code. So this will be the text of the H1 will be replaced with this text. Okay, and so if I save, which I think I did, okay, and you can see this is already refreshed. The page is refreshed with that one. And if we go here, you have the root, and you can see, okay, you can recognize there's a data. Inside the data, you define the property called site name. This is value. I might even be able to change and update it, for example, or like maybe just app 2. You can see now I'm changing the values of the variable defining view. The page would change accordingly as well. That's all working fine. Okay. So it will look like this. Okay, and then now we can add more information. So this is what you need to do in the first part when I said you need to store the, say, the lesson information in the view. And this is what you do. In this case, we are storing the product information inside data. Okay, I'm probably gonna just copy and paste. I'm not gonna type everything here. It's gonna take a long while to do. Okay, and so first, just remember the value of this data property itself is a JSON object. Then inside you have key and value pair. And again, to separate each key value pair is using comma. So you need a comma first. Then I define second key value pair. So I will define products and all these values for products. Again, so if I want to make it look nicer using format document or Alt Shift F, I think, or Option Shift F on Mac. So maybe make it smaller. Oh, this needs to be bigger. This is slightly smaller. Okay, and then now we defined a second view variable we can use called the product itself. Its value itself is another JSON object. That means you can say product.id or product.title to access these values. That's a more complex one. Okay, so the way we're going to use that is now we're going to using these. So the first one says, okay, the main, so that's the HTML tag, which is marking that is the main part of my app. And figure, so figure allows you to create, including image and a caption. But this is actually a more important part. It says image vbind source equal to product.image. Okay, that's a bit more confusing part. So first, let's do this part. Okay, so first maybe go one step back. So the way you're using these v directive is the same way as you would do with, say, HTML properties. And HTML can have other properties. For example, you can have a h1 and you can add, say, HTML tag into it. Or if it's image, you can add width and height. These are HTML properties. And then the syntax of to the browser, and these are just like HTML properties, just predefined ones, and defined by the views. So it's called vbind source. I need to have values for these properties. So these values is always inside double quote or single quote or any quote, just as normal HTML element properties, the value is always in quote. And then this particular value, it says product.images. So first, this product will be referred to this product in the view data or the view variable. Okay, and it will say product.image. Okay, so then this will refer to this. Okay, which essentially is the path and file name for the picture. So if I have that, okay, and then the next thing is I say vbind, okay, and vbind would be means give the values of certain property a certain value, and so the value is this part, and the property it gives values to is the source. So if you remember, for the image HTML image element, it has a property called src, which tells it where to find the picture it needs to display. So now what here does is says, I want to make the src property of this element the value of this, which is here. So if inside the images directory I have this picture, then it will display on the on this page. Yeah. Okay, so this is probably a more difficult part. And then we said h2 v text equal to product.title. So product.title, then it shows that's the title of the product. And the v text is similar before. We saw that here already. That means it adds the values of this view variable as the text for this H2, and similarly we add this value as the text for this paragraph. Okay, and then finally the price. And instead of using v text, here we're using double curly bracket. And double curly bracket is the equivalent of v text, but so it's less typing compared to v text. You just say double curly bracket product.price. That means the price is going to be displayed here after the text. Okay, so let's do that now. So I had H1. Okay, I'm gonna skip this part. I'm gonna even skip the figure. So first I'm gonna do image and the source. Yeah, I don't need any of these. Okay, I'm gonna do vbind. Actually, there's a shorthand for this as well, but later. Okay, so currently, if I do this, nothing's gonna happen on my page. And because product.name is going to looking for this file, but does not exist yet, because you can see and on here I don't have an images directory and with a file and image file in there, which I could include, and then it will be able to display here. It just displays it in data. You have products with these information. And if I can quickly find the image and put it in the okay. So actually it's easier if I just remove the .png. That's product full size .png. Why it's not? So what I did is actually I have this file there, which is product full size.png. So that's the picture I want to use.
I think you need to change it to product.image, not product.name.
Yes. Okay, yeah. Well spotted. Yeah. Okay. So now I bind. So I have this one now. And the other thing I need to display is the H2P and okay. So the title, description, and the price. So I would do, I think it's H2 B text equal to product.title. Okay, so you can see the title is show up here, and then there's P text equal to product dot, I think it's description. Okay, I have a description here. It's very small. And finally, I think it's also a P, but instead of using v text, I'm going to just using double curly bracket and then say product.price. Okay, so that's the equivalent of say v tag equal to product.price, and that's what you see here. Yeah, and so the only thing, the difference here is, well, if you're using double curly brackets, you put them in between the tag, not inside as a property for the starting tag. Okay. And then we also see this little bit here because And in the text description, we actually use the EM, want to make the text italic, because we're using vtext, which is the equivalent of the HTML in the text, which treat everything as text, so it will not treat this HTML code. And then the equivalent of the in the HTML would be vHTML. So if we get this one to v-html and the save, and you can see here, now the text become italic and this EM and /EM tag disappeared because this is now treated as HTML code. Yeah, and usually it's safer to use vtext and try to avoid use vHTML unless you have to in this case. Okay, and that's it. This is the last slide. And so we covered the chapter 2 on Vue.js now. So that's the reading for this week. Okay.